I still remember the way she said it, like it slipped out before she could stop herself. Asterisk, you've grown up fast. Asterisk, I laughed then, awkward and unsure what to do with the warmth in her voice. But later, when I replayed it in my head, the words didn't sound casual anymore. They sounded careful. The shop was nearly empty that Thursday evening. The air smelled faintly of oil and coffee, my usual mix. I was finishing a repair job on an old Triumph motorcycle when I saw her reflection in the window. She stood there for a moment, hesitant, before pushing the door open. Sorry, she said, brushing her hair back. Didn't mean to interrupt. She wasn't interrupting anything. I'd been half distracted anyway, waiting for closing time. But the way she stood, poised, yet uncertain, made it feel like something shifted in the air. She was in her 40s, maybe older, dressed in a slate gray coat that looked a little too elegant for this side of town. A pair of reading glasses hung from her neckline on a thin silver chain. Her eyes caught mine, just long enough to make me look away first. I just, needed someone to take a look at my car, she said. It's been making a strange noise. Her voice carried that calm confidence people earn from years of knowing exactly who they are. I wiped my hands on a rag and nodded toward the lot. Sure. What kind of noise? She smiled faintly. The worrying kind. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Like she wasn't just talking about the car. Out by her car, the light was fading. I crouched beside the front wheel, trying not to look like I was paying attention to her standing so close. She kept her arms folded, glancing at her watch, then at me, then away again. So, how long have you been working here? She asked. Almost 3 years, I said. Before that, college. Didn't really fit. She hummed, the sound soft and low. I know what that's like. Something about her tone made me glance up. She was looking somewhere past me, lost in a thought she didn't plan to share. For a second, I wondered what she saw there, something she'd left behind, maybe. You remind me of someone, she said suddenly. Yeah, I asked. Good reminder or bad one? Her mouth curved in a way that wasn't quite a smile. Good, I think. Back inside, I made her coffee while the engine cooled down. She leaned on the counter, watching me with that calm attentiveness older people have, like she'd already lived through 100 moments like this and was trying to see if I'd noticed the shape of it. You're not as quiet as you used to be, she said after a pause. That threw me. You remember me? Her eyes lifted. Of course. You used to come in with your uncle. You were what, 16? I felt something stir, like a film reel spooling backward. The memory hit. The old truck, my uncle's laughter, me standing off to the side while she talked to him, thinking she seemed untouchable. I didn't think you'd remember that, I said quietly. She smiled again, this time smaller, softer. You've grown up fast. The words hung there, between the hum of the lights and the faint drip of coffee into the pot. For a moment, I couldn't think of what to say. She looked away first, pretending to study a row of spark plugs by the window. When she left, the door chime echoed a little too long. I watched her car pull out, her hand brushing a strand of hair behind her ear as she glanced at the mirror. The taillights faded into the dusk. I told myself I'd forget it by morning, but I didn't. I kept hearing her voice, steady, almost kind, as if she'd seen through all the noise in me and said something I didn't realize I'd been waiting to hear. She came back the next week, said it was just for a follow-up on the car, but the way her voice trailed off told me even she didn't fully believe it. The morning was gray and quiet, the kind that makes everything feel like it's holding its breath. I was tightening bolts on a pickup when I noticed her through the glass again. Same coat, hair tied back this time. She hesitated at the doorway like she wasn't sure she should be there. You're early, I said, wiping my hands. I was nearby, she answered, her tone light, but her eyes somewhere else. Thought I'd check in. I nodded, pretending to look busy. She watched me for a moment, too long for small talk, and then stepped closer, setting her keys on the counter. You don't have to do that, I said when she offered to help sort some parts I'd left scattered. I know, she said, but sometimes it's nice to have something to do. There was something behind her words, an exhaustion that didn't belong to lack of sleep. Her hands were steady, but her movements carried a strange carefulness, as if she was afraid something inside her might spill if she moved too fast. When she reached for a wrench, her sleeve slipped, revealing a faint bruise near her wrist. She noticed me noticing and quickly tugged the fabric back down. "Bumped into a drawer," she said too quickly. I didn't press. The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. More like both of us knew words would ruin it. We worked side by side for a while. She asked about the bike I was fixing last time, and I told her it was still in pieces, just like me most days. She laughed, not loud, not bright, just a quiet sound that made my chest tighten. I kept catching small details, how she exhaled before speaking, how her smile faded faster than it arrived, how her eyes flickered whenever her phone buzzed in her bag, but she didn't answer. Every little thing about her felt half-hidden. "You're observant," she said suddenly, catching me looking. "That's unusual." "Not really," I said. "You just have a lot worth noticing." That earned me a glance. One of those quick, assessing looks that seemed to weigh what I'd meant versus what I'd said. Then she smiled again, but softer this time, and looked away. By the time she was leaving, the shop had gone quiet. The radio murmured in the background, a low static hum. She lingered by the door, her hand on the frame. "Thank you," she said, "for fixing more than you had to." I almost asked what she meant, but something in her eyes told me not to. There was a vulnerability there, a flicker she probably hadn't shown anyone in a while. She turned to go, then paused, half over her shoulder. "You really have changed since you were 16. I swallowed. "You haven't," I said, before I could stop myself. Her lips parted, but no words came. Just a faint breath, a quiet moment that stretched longer than it should have. Then she smiled, barely, and left, the door closing with a soft chime that felt louder than it should. I stood there long after she was gone, her voice still lingering in the air like the scent of her perfume, subtle, impossible to forget. The rain started just after sunset, soft at first, then steady, like it planned to stay a while. The shop was closed, the tools packed away, but she was still there, waiting out the storm. Her car refused to start, and she'd laughed, saying it was poetic in a cruel sort of way. We sat on opposite sides of the small office desk, the fluorescent light humming above us. The sound of rain against the glass filled the silence between our words. "I don't usually let people see me flustered," she said, glancing at the window. "It's not a good look." "You don't look flustered," I said. She gave me a small, tired smile. "Then you're not looking closely." I wanted to tell her that I was, that I couldn't seem to stop. Her hair was damp at the ends, curling slightly. Her hands were clasped together in her lap, fingers tracing over each other like she was trying to hide their shaking. "Do you want me to call someone?" I asked. "No," she said quickly. Then, softer, "It's better if I don't." That caught me off guard. Her tone wasn't defensive. It was protective, like she was shielding both of us from something unnamed. Minutes stretched. The heater kicked in, filling the air with the faint smell of metal and dust. I poured her another cup of coffee, though she hadn't finished the first. "You're kind," she murmured. "You shouldn't be." "Why not?" "Because kindness makes people think they can lean on you." She looked at me then, really looked. "And that's not fair to you." Her words sank somewhere deep, where logic couldn't reach. I wanted to ask who had leaned too hard on her. Instead, I just said, "Maybe I don't mind." That earned a quiet laugh, one that faded almost as soon as it began. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, then looked away. A flash of headlights swept across the room, followed by the buzz of a phone on the desk. She hesitated before picking it up. A man's name flashed across the screen, too familiar, too sharp. She turned the phone face down, the movement quick and final. "You can answer," I said, though my voice came out tighter than I meant. "It's fine," she replied. But the way she stared at the dark screen said otherwise. The rain grew louder. She stood and moved toward the window, resting her hand on the glass. Her reflection trembled in the pane, haloed by streetlight. "I should go," she whispered. "You can wait until it stops." Her shoulders tensed, then eased again. "You always make it sound so simple." I stepped closer, not close enough to touch her, but close enough to feel the static between us. The air smelled of rain and coffee and something warm I couldn't name. She turned slightly. eyes catching mine, the space between us thinner than air. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then her phone rang again, loud this time. She flinched, grabbed her coat, and the moment shattered. I watched her leave, the doors swinging shut behind her. The storm swallowed her up, but her voice lingered in my head, quiet and uncertain. You always make it sound so simple. She came by just before closing. No storm this time. Just a sharp wind that carried the scent of cold metal and dusk. She said she was passing through, but her voice had that same quiet tension I'd learned to recognize. Something unsaid pressed between her words. I was wiping down a workbench when she asked, "Do you ever wish you could stop time? Just pause things before they go too far." I looked up. Depends on what too far means. She didn't answer. Instead, she ran her fingers along the edge of the counter, tracing circles into the dust. Her nails were chipped. Her ring finger was bare. I dried my hands and leaned against the opposite side. "You okay?" Her laugh was soft, breathless. "No, but it's fine. It's always fine." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded, heavy. She kept her eyes on the floor, and I realized she didn't want comfort. She wanted honesty, the kind that didn't need rescuing. "You don't have to pretend," I said quietly. "I'm not pretending," she replied, almost too quickly. Then, more gently, "I just don't know what we're doing." There it was, the crack in the armor. The first real truth between us. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled in my throat. She looked up then, meeting my eyes. For a second, everything else, the tools, the humming light, the ticking clock, disappeared. "We keep finding reasons to see each other," she continued. "Excuses, really. I tell myself it's harmless, that you're just kind, but it doesn't feel harmless anymore." Her voice shook on the last word. I took a slow breath, feeling the ground shift beneath everything we'd been pretending not to name. Maybe it's not supposed to feel harmless. Her eyes flickered, like she'd been waiting for me to say it and dreading it at the same time. She stepped back, shaking her head. "You're too young to say things like that. And you're too smart to believe age fixes anything." The air between us thickened. She exhaled, closing her eyes for a moment as if to steady herself. "You don't understand what this could cost." I almost said, "I don't care," but the truth was, I did. I cared too much. "Instead," I whispered, "then why are you here?" Her lips parted. "Because you look at me like I'm still someone worth being." That landed like a punch. She turned toward the door, clutching her keys, but didn't move. I thought she might say more, or maybe step closer, but she didn't. She just stood there, breathing, trembling slightly in the still air. I didn't reach for her. I couldn't. The silence between us was louder than touch, sharper than any confession. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely audible. I wish I hadn't said that. Then she left, and for the first time, I wished I'd stopped her. She didn't come by for almost 2 weeks. The quiet felt heavier than it should have, each day stretching out like the pause between breaths. I told myself I wasn't waiting, but I still caught myself looking toward the door whenever I heard footsteps. When she finally returned, she looked different. Tired, yes, but also lighter, in a way that worried me. Her hair was tied up, no makeup this time, her coat buttoned to the collar as if she was holding herself together from the outside in. "Busy?" she asked, hovering by the door. "Not really," I said. "Just the usual." She smiled faintly. "That's good. The usual keeps people sane." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and went back to the workbench. But she didn't leave. She walked over to the shelf, her fingers trailing along a row of old photographs my uncle used to keep. Customers, old cars, the shop through the years. She stopped at one and froze. It was a picture of my uncle, me at 16 beside him, and standing next to him, her. Younger, brighter, her hand resting lightly on my uncle's shoulder. I hadn't even realized that photo was there. "You knew him?" I said quietly. She nodded. "I did. We were close once." Something in her tone made the room tilt. I set down my wrench slowly. "You never said." I didn't think it mattered anymore. She turned to face me, eyes glassy but steady. "He was important to me. I thought I'd move past it. But being here, it keeps pulling me backward." It took me a moment to process it. My uncle had been gone for years. The memory of his laugh, the smell of grease and cigarettes, it all came rushing back. And suddenly, she wasn't just the woman who walked into my shop. She was a ghost from a life I'd left unfinished. "He never mentioned you," I said. She gave a small, sad smile. "He wouldn't have. We didn't end well." The silence between us turned fragile. I didn't know whether to feel betrayed or grateful that she'd come back at all. She walked closer, until she was standing where the light fell between us in thin, uneven lines. "You remind me of him," she whispered. "The way you think before you speak. The way you look at people, like you're trying to see what they're not saying." I swallowed hard. "That's not fair to either of us." "No," she said softly. "It isn't." She stepped closer, then stopped, eyes flicking to the photo again. "He was the last person who made me feel seen," she said. "Until now." My pulse stumbled. The words hung there, unadorned, dangerous. Before I could respond, she turned away, pressing her palms against the counter like she needed something solid to hold on to. "I shouldn't have told you that," she said. "It changes everything." And it did. Not in the way people talk about in movies. No music, no kiss, no confession. Just a shift, deep and irreversible, like a door closing somewhere inside both of us. I wanted to reach out, to say something that would make it easier. But all I managed was a whisper. "It's okay," I said. "I think I was already changed." She came back one last time before winter set in. The air had that heavy stillness of early evening, the kind that makes sound travel softer, like the world was trying not to intrude. I was locking up when I saw her through the glass, standing in the fading light. No pretense this time, no small talk hovering on her lips. Just a quiet, searching look, as if she'd already decided something and only needed me to know it. "I didn't plan to come," she said, "but I didn't plan to stay away either." I stepped aside to let her in. The shop was dim except for the single bulb over the counter. Dust floated in the light between us. She looked around like she was memorizing it, the smell of grease, the faint hum of a heater, the photo still pinned to the wall. Her eyes landed on it and lingered, but she didn't speak of my uncle this time. She just sighed, as if exhaling the last of that ghost. "I used to think love was supposed to be loud," she said finally. "Big gestures, impossible timing, the kind of thing people write about. But it's quieter than I thought. It sneaks in while you're looking the other way." I didn't know if she was talking to me or herself. Maybe both. She moved closer, resting her hands on the counter. Her fingers brushed mine by accident, or maybe not. I didn't pull away. Neither did she. The warmth was small, steady, human. "I can't explain this," she whispered. "I don't even want to. But I can't keep pretending it's nothing." The words didn't sound like a confession, more like a surrender. I nodded slowly. "You don't have to." We stood there, breathing the same thin air, not touching but close enough for our reflections to merge in the glass of the window. I could see how tired she was, the kind of tired that comes from carrying a life too long. And maybe she saw something in me too, the boy who'd grown up fast, and the man still trying to figure out what that meant. "I'm not asking for anything," she said, voice trembling. "Not promises. Not forever." "I know," I said. "Me neither." The silence that followed was heavy, but not cruel. It felt like understanding, like both of us knew this would have to exist quietly, in the spaces between the rest of our lives. Outside, the wind rattled the sign. Inside, the heater clicked off, leaving us in the soft hum of the city beyond the walls. She leaned forward slightly, her forehead resting against mine for just a breath, long enough to feel her pulse steady, slow, calm. Then she stepped back. The moment broke, but gently, like something placed down instead of dropped. "I should go," she said, her voice barely more than air. I didn't stop her this time. I just watched as she reached the door, her silhouette framed in the light. She turned once, a faint, unreadable smile on her face. "Take care of yourself," she murmured. And then she was gone. No echo, no goodbye, just the quiet collapse of something that had finally learned how to be real. It's been months since I last saw her. The seasons shifted quietly, the way they always do, but the shop still smells the same. Oil, dust, a hint of rain when the door opens. Sometimes I still catch myself looking toward the counter, half expecting her to walk in with that hesitant smile. She never does, but the memory feels close enough to touch. I think about that night a lot, the quiet one, when she didn't say goodbye. There was no ending, not really. Just an understanding that what we'd shared couldn't survive being named. And maybe that's what made it real. She taught me that connection doesn't always need to lead somewhere. Sometimes it just is, a small, unfinished chapter that still manages to change you. I used to think love was something you claimed, something that had to be won or kept. But now, I think it's more like light. It touches what it can, then moves on. I fixed up her car last month when her brother came to sell it. He didn't know who I was, didn't know what the smell of her perfume still does to a room. But when I turned the key and heard the engine hum, I smiled. She'd left it better than before, in her way. And me, I've changed too. I listen more. I slow down before I speak. I think about what people hide behind their small talk. Maybe that's her in me now. That quiet patience, that ache for meaning in ordinary moments. Sometimes, when I lock up late, I stand outside the shop and look at the reflection in the glass. I can almost see the two of us there, her leaning on the counter, me pretending to focus on work. I don't try to erase it anymore. Some people pass through your life not to stay, but to leave you with the proof that you're capable of feeling something true. If I ever saw her again, I think I'd just thank her, not for what happened, but for reminding me that love doesn't always need a future to matter. And then I'd let her walk away again, this time without the weight of what if. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?